Hopefully you'll be able to see the board okay. If not, we'll close the curtains, maybe a little dark. But first of all, I want to say I'm really glad I got a chance to meet with y'all individually last week, because it's going to allow us to better tailor the classes for the next few weeks based on what you're doing. Now, that's not to say you've all picked the same thing. You haven't. You've picked some very, very good topics, and they range in a lot of different fields. Some of you are doing textual analysis. Some of you are doing almost a behavioral analysis in Lucian's case. But what we're going to see is there are going to be certain things that we can use together to make, whether it's textual analysis or behavioral analysis or even social analysis, fit into this idea of working with texts that have already been written, with things you can find online, and by putting your own ideas forward from those. Now, what we talk about today may be a little bit of a review for some of you who are in the creative writing class or in the did anybody in here have me for 1430? Anybody have the composition class? Okay, it may not be as much of a review then. That's been 2 years, or almost 2 years, so I can't remember all of that. But what we're going to look at over the next few days, or the next few class periods, is this idea of textual analysis and different things that you're going to see come up over and over again. We've already talked about moral dilemma. That's going to fit into this. We've talked some in your individual meetings with me about different themes or archetypes that might come up. Over the next few days, we will have one entire class period devoted totally to the idea of archetype and trope. So it'll help you to define those a little bit better. But what I want to do first is just give you a basic idea of textual analysis and how it actually works. So let's move in and take a look at textual analysis and what exactly it is. Can everybody see this okay? Okay. So this is kind of a broad definition of textual analysis. And it's the analysis of how an author... That's better. The analysis of how an author presents an argument, all right? When you're looking at specific texts or films or TV shows or pieces of music, this is part of what I was talking about previously about looking at things differently, about looking at the world differently. You should look at pretty much everything as a presentation of an idea, an argument, so to say. So when a person goes through the trouble of making a film or writing a book or even writing a poem, you can look at this in terms of an argument, as of somebody presenting their own side of a particular idea. Going further, what we're looking at is how well the person uses specific techniques in order to address this argument or this point of view. And what we're going to start looking at today are some of these techniques that you might come across when you're looking at artistic works. Like I said, though, these can be applied to a lot of different fields. So what we're going to dive into today are these techniques. Some of them you may have heard of, but how we actually apply them to textual analysis is going to be individualized based on what your specific topic is. Okay? Let's take a look at a few of these techniques. You may recognize some of them. We've discussed briefly the idea of trope, and we've mentioned archetype. Like I said, we're going to do a full class period on this idea of archetype and how it functions within texts. But the idea of motif, symbolism, allusion, allegory, these are things you might remember from creative writing. They're by no means everything that you can talk about in textual analysis, but they're common ideas that will continue to come up. Okay? When we're talking about this idea of techniques the author uses to present their point of view, to present their argument, it generally comes back to an idea of symbolism. All right? And this idea of symbolism is expanded through the other techniques that we'll see. May not have a chance to get to all of them today, but we should be able to address quite a few of them. If we don't, we'll just carry it over into next class period. Okay? So let's look first briefly at this idea of symbolism. Symbolism is simply, right here, the use of images to represent ideas or qualities. Okay? The use of images to represent ideas or qualities. Meaning, you're using a symbol to say what you're not saying. Right? So it's kind of poetic in a sense. We see the symbol here. This is a symbol that we see pretty much on a daily basis. What does it mean? What does this symbol mean right here? Stop, right? We have come to recognize this as meaning stop. Does an octagon mean stop? No. We've come to recognize it as a symbol that represents this idea, stop. Most of the time you'll see stop written right across there, but if we just see the shape, we know that that has come to symbolize this idea of stop. Also the color, but we'll talk about color a little bit later. Similarly, if we look at symbols, again, some of this is going to branch over into the idea of allegory and illusion. And we'll see how these are actually types of symbolism that appear in different types of texts. So if we look at this, we have the idea of stop. What about this one? Nazi, right? But is that what it originally meant? Does anybody know the real history of this symbol? It is. It's a Buddhist symbol. It's a symbol of peace. It's called the wheel, right? So it's a symbol of renewal, right? But we have come to recognize it. We have come to associate the symbol of the swastika with Germany, with the Third Reich, right? So it's taken on a different meaning based on something that has happened in history, in culture. So just remember that not always is the symbol going to represent what it originally meant. We've come to recognize it differently based on history. But when we see this, it's generally a given this has to do with the Third Reich, with Germany, right? So if it's used in something else, if it's used to kind of reproduce the Buddhist idea, then it requires a lot more explanation to say, wait, no, that's not what I meant here. So we take this idea, we take this symbol to represent, right? What about just a simple T? Or a cross? What does that represent? Christianity, right? So that the symbol of the cross has come to represent Christianity. Now, when two pieces of wood were originally put together, did they have this inherent idea to represent Christianity? No. Again, it's something that was represented by history, by culture. Along the same line, we have, I don't know if you've seen it or not, we have this symbol here, which is also a symbol of Christianity. It goes back to when, in the story in the New Testament, Jesus was able to feed the masses with just one basket of fish. So this has become known as the Christian fish, right? It's a symbol representing Christianity. But if I come in here and draw a little picture, and I got a little boat, a guy here, he's fishing. Is this still a symbol of Christianity? Why do you say no, Zoe?
Fishing.
Okay, it's fishing. Does anybody else see this as a symbol of Christianity? And herein lies how textual analysis works, all right, when it comes to symbolism. Did I take away the Christian fish? No. I added to it. So somewhere buried in that picture, there's still a Christian fish, right? Which means there's still a symbol representative of Christianity in that picture. And that's what happens in film. That's what happens in books. That's what happens in poetry, is a lot of times the symbol becomes a part of the actual big picture, the story, or the actual film. It becomes something that you have to dissect and take apart. You have to come in here and take all this away to re-examine what exactly, how we got to this particular image. So symbolism is something that can either be overt, it can be something that we see and recognize like stop sign, or it can be something hidden within the text that you actually have to take apart to find, right? Any questions on symbolism? Again, this can be done textually. It can also be done in a psychological setting. If we're doing behavioral analysis, for example, we might look at how symbols are used to make people act in a certain way. But when we look at motif, we'll see that even stronger. Okay? Here's what I'd like you to do in your groups. I would like you to see if you can come up with 5 examples of symbolism. They can be from your daily life, they can be from a movie or from a book, but in your groups, come up with 5 examples of symbolism. Talk together to figure this out. Yes, it is. Ladies, talk about it. Don't just look online individually. I want you guys to talk in your groups, please. Yeah. Do what? Somebody call me? Oh, I thought I heard my name. You bring up some very good points. You're absolutely right. It is subjective.
Because when I was thought about writing about music,
Mm-hmm.
music is a category of lots of concepts, melodies.
It is.
Yeah. So,
What we're trying to do, though, when we're looking at symbolism, is we're trying to understand the author's real intentions.
but you don't know.
You don't. I know. That's why it's.
Try to interpret it
Yeah,
in your own way.
you are.
How do you try your own interpretation?
Exactly. But as we start looking at ideas of, say, illusion and allegory, we start to see that although some things are subjective, we start to realize some things are done on purpose. You know, so we'll start to see, like, the idea of symbolism take on a role for the entire film or the entire song. Yeah, if you see one instance of, say, like you're talking about the swastika, it's subjective. It depends on your background. But if we see that paired with an idea of someone being heavily oppressed, right, then what we do is we put those two together and we say, okay, the director or the author is using that symbol as a representative of oppression. So it's still subjective, but it's less subjective when looking at the author's true intention. Yeah. But yes, you're absolutely right. It can be very subjective. One more minute, guys. Okay, group number 1. Give me an example of where you might find symbolism. Here? Oh, yeah. Apple, okay. Yeah. If we see that, we know immediately what that product is. Absolutely. But why does it have a bite taken out of it?
That's significant.
It is. But that's what I'm saying. You could actually take that idea of symbolism, go back and study how that logo was exactly designed. Because there's a story behind why that apple has a bite out of it. Yeah. Good. The Apple logo. Group number 2, give me an example of symbolism. What, the thumbs up? Yeah. Something we see every day. What does this mean? Good. We absolutely recognize that as a symbol of good. Or as a symbol of positive. Yeah. Okay. Group number 3, give me an example. Cougar. What do you mean? Ah, yes, as a mascot for Kane University. Yeah. We see that, and what color is the cougar? And blue. Yep, those colors actually will move into the next thing we talk about in the motif. Very good. And group number 4, give me an example. A light.
For barber shop.
Oh, yes, yes. The swirling light of the barber shop. Quick, a kind of a side note, the idea of the barber shop with the blue and the red spinning. Do you know what that comes from? It does not. Well, it kind of comes from medicine. You're very close on that. The idea of the barbershop with the spinning pole, originally, do you know how you knew if there was a barbershop? When you went into a barbershop, you could get your hair cut, you could get shaved also. And what generally happens when you're using a long blade and you're shaving? You get cut. So what do? They take a white towel, mop up the blood, then they'll rinse the blood out, and then hang the rags in front of the building. So the sign, the original kind of symbol of a barbershop, were rags, bloody rags, hanging in front of the shop. Well, that's not very nice, right? So what they did is they replaced it. People recognized the white and the red together. So they took that idea and they made a symbol of a spinning pole with the red and white. The blue was added later. Yeah, the red and white spinning pole is based on the idea of bloody rags in front of a barbershop. So again, kind of a double layer of the symbolism. All right. Good. Any questions about symbols? All right. Now, let's take it one step further. I want you to think about films you have watched. Okay? Take a few minutes right now and consider what you've seen in film. Have you seen something that might be a symbol in a film? A symbol for something other than the film you're actually watching. Right? See what you can come up with. Take about 3 minutes to talk about this. Yeah.
Symbolism.
Yes.
Shape or kind of the common sense in people's mind.
It could be anything. It could be a shape. It could be an actual image. It could be an actual object.
How about I draw a circle and several lines?
Mm-hmm.
That makes some in that kind of symbol.
It could, yeah. It could. Yeah.
So every painting is a symbolism.
Almost every painting does have some form of symbolism in it, yeah. When we look at visual art, we can look at different colors, different motifs, different things do represent other things. It is a type of symbolism. Yeah. And you'll see how that fits into further ideas of symbolism as we go through the next ones. You're absolutely right. Paintings do have levels of symbolism in them. Most of them. You guys come up with an idea? Okay. One more minute, guys. Yeah.
Is the action in the movie a symbol, or you need some pictures of...
Give me an example.
Superman,
Okay, but what would symbolize individual heroism in Superman? He is, but what can we see in Superman as a symbol of individual heroism? You're right, you're on the edge of an action that can actually be seen as a symbol. What can Superman do that nobody else can do? There you go. His idea of flight can become a symbol because it separates him from the rest of the common people, right? So that action of flight does kind of become a symbol. Yeah. It distinguishes him as kind of the individual hero, right? Now, it kind of gets taken apart when we look at when he joins the Justice League and all that other stuff. But when we're looking at Superman as an individual hero, yeah, the idea of flight is a symbol of his separation between the common people. Yeah, so the action can work. Yeah. How about you guys? Did you come up with an idea?
The scar like a thunder.
On Harry Potter? Absolutely. Oh.
I'm just raising it.
Yeah, it absolutely can. The lightning bolt, yeah. And we're actually going to talk more about that at the end of class today.
Because I see the Harry Potter films.
Mm-hmm. It's on there. Yeah, no, that's a good idea. Yeah, the lightning scar on Harry Potter does symbolize... It symbolizes difference. It actually symbolizes a lot of things, as we'll find out at the end of class. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, you will find that out when you do some research at the end of class. Cool. How about you guys? What did you come up with?
A cedar in Edward Scissorhands.
Okay, what do they represent?
We think it represents the distant relationship between human being and the monster.
It can, absolutely. It establishes the barrier between them. Very good job. Yeah. How about you guys?
In Great Gatsby,
Okay.
the green light
Yes, the green light in Great Gatsby. Okay.
is for Gatsby's rain, hope, and love for Daisy.
Absolutely. Good example. Yes, the green light in Great Gatsby. And also, that's one that actually transcends the movie. It's a big element in the book as well. Good. Very good job. Okay. So we're starting to see different elements of symbolism come alive in different texts. But this is just the base. This is just the very base of the idea of symbolism. The idea of symbolism can actually branch out into some different ideas. But before we see those different ideas, we need to understand one other term called motif. All right? Now, you might recognize this idea of motif also as theme. Okay? So you can consider motif and theme as the same thing. It's an object, concept, style, or idea that repeats itself throughout a literary work. Now, remember, literary work does not necessarily have to be written. It can be something on film as well. We're going to look at two different ideas here of motif and see how it works. All right? So it's an idea that's repetitive. It becomes its own symbol. All right? One of the best visual examples of this is a style of movie called film noir. Okay? French term, N-O-I-R, noir. Noir means black. Okay? So film black. And what this black refers to is actually two things. It refers to the darkness inside of an individual as well as the darkness represented in the film itself visually. Okay? There's a specific style, there's a specific motif created by film noir. And if you watch a film noir piece, visually what you're going to see is a lot of contrast, a lot of very, very dark images with very, very light images. And this becomes representative of the style of the film. It also kind of becomes representative of the movement within the film. If we see a person who's in the shadows, we know that this person is hiding something, whether it's from himself or from somebody else. If he steps off into the light, then it becomes revealing, right? So the idea of film noir and the idea of motif in film noir with dark and light takes on a visual aspect, it takes on a storytelling aspect, and it also looks at the person inside. Most of these films are based on the idea of a detective, right? Really big in the 1940s and 50s, the idea of this detective. And then there were elements as well that would be, okay, you've got the one detective who is facing some kind of inner struggle, right? You have Usually the Gal Friday is another term that we have associated with film noir, and the Gal Friday is the one trustworthy person that the detective can trust, and it's normally a female, right? We have the temptress, who's usually represented in color in a red dress, but most of the films were black and white, so we came to understand it was a red dress. But this woman is usually the client who comes in asking the detective, oh, I need the help, I need your help to find out what my husband is doing or why my husband died. And then you find out at the end of the film, big switch, she was the one that did it, right? So she's not trustworthy at all. Now, there are a lot of other elements that fold into film noir. But what is done with this is there is a motif that's created. There's a theme that's created both visually, stylistically, but also along a storyline. As we'll see when we talk about archetype, this has become a trope. This has become an archetype. The film noir trope is something that we see now in films that try to pay tribute to film noir, and even later films in the film noir era where they were just using it because it was commonplace. If you tried to make the same type of film without the same type of lighting, without the same type of characters, it wouldn't be considered film noir. So the motif tends to take over this style, or the motif tends to become the style of film noir. Now, that's in film. We also see motifs in poetry. We see motifs in literature. Going back to the creative writing class, it doesn't take much to create a motif. Motifs can be created through language as well and the word choices. See if you remember this poem. In a station of the metro, faces in all right. Poem by Ezra Pound. In a station of the metro, the apparitions of those faces in the crowd, petals on a wet black bough. Okay? We've looked at this poem before, but we've looked at it in terms of like how Pound put the words together to create sound and how to create image. But let's look at it in terms of motif. All right? Is this a happy poem? Why? How can you look at it and know it's not a happy poem? Apparitions. What is an apparition? It's a ghost, right? What else do you see? Black. Death, right? What else? Wet. Okay, why does that fit in? That's here in Winjo. It's always uncomfortable when it's wet, right? Okay, so yes, we have just a few words here that help to create a dark motif through the language itself. Apparitions, ghosts, wet, uncomfortable, black, death. So these three words create a dark motif. They create a dark theme for the poem. We can do this simply with words. We don't have to have an image to do this. And you'll see this in literature. You'll see it in poetry, in this form in particular. But when we're looking at longer works, for example, you bring up Harry Potter, there are motifs in Harry Potter, both visually and story-driven. If we look at the Harry Potter books, then we look at the motif of death, right? There's a continuous motif of death throughout Harry Potter. And this motif creates expectations of us. We expect Harry is going to die or is going to face some kind of a demise at the end of every book. That expectation is created through the motif. We also have this magical motif. If you were reading a Harry Potter book and you were reading 4 books in and in the 5th book there was no magic at all, what would you do? You probably wouldn't want to keep reading. Like, this is silly. Where's the magic? Where are the spells? There's a motif created here, a fantasy motif that's created through the story itself. Now, there are a ton of other motifs represented in Harry Potter. I'm not going to go into them yet because you're going to find some of those as we move on. But let's take it out of textual analysis for a minute, and let's look at it in terms of maybe behavioral analysis. All right? How do people act when placed in a certain motif, when placed in a certain color scheme, okay? Here's something that was studied about 10 years ago, actually about 12 years ago now, at Texas Tech University, where I went to school. The Texas Tech colors are red and black, all right? Like we have blue and white here for Kane. Ours are red and black. Well, we're a medical university also. We had our own emergency room, have our own emergency room, and they decided to make it more Texas Techy to put all of the triage nurses, the nurses that you meet when you first come into the emergency room with a bad problem, in black and red. Okay? So a motif was created that followed the university colors. Well, do you see a slight problem with this? The first person you meet when you go into the room is going to be either in black or red. How is this a problem? It actually creates two problems. What did you say black represents, Zoe? Death. All right? So you walk in and the first thing you see is someone who's dressed in all black. Kind of a somber, sad image, right? Even though they're wearing scrubs, they're all black. But more importantly, were the people who were dressed in all red. Blood, yes, but there's something even deeper that they didn't realize. Color affects mood. Color affects how we interact emotionally with people. What do you think red does to people? Red can make you act more aggressively. There are a lot of psychological studies that have been done about how color affects our mood and color affects our emotions. Red, especially a bright red, like what our triage nurses were dressed in, can make people more aggressive. Now, when you go into an emergency room, you see someone, then you wait for 1 hour, 3 hours, 6 hours, 9 hours, depending on how busy it is. Well, what happens to you when you're sitting there waiting to have a medical problem taken care of? You're already getting upset, right? So we add this aggression based on color to a problem that's already existing. And guess what? There were more fights in the emergency room. There was lower ratings of customer care from the triage nurses. And they actually did a psychological study. And after about 6 months, and people going, hey, we think we figured out what the problem is, they switched them back to a light blue, and everything was normal. Right? Everything returned to normal. So, I mean, this is not an individual incident. These are studies that have been done over and over again. So, the idea of motif isn't just in textual analysis. So, Lucian, for example, if you're doing something with mob mentality, that's something else you might look at, is how specifically color in a specific setting might affect that mob mentality. Or if you're looking at something in a psychology or sociology venue, then you might look at how color affects people's moods in different rooms as well. Lighting can do the same thing, right? Yes, darkness can make you guys tired, right? Okay, so here's what I'd like for you to do. Again, I want you to talk in your groups, see if you can think of, whether in film or in daily life, where have you recognized an idea of motif? All right? See if you can recognize an idea of motif. Go ahead. You got one? All right, hold on to it. right? And, right. And what can you do with a Windows phone? Exactly. It creates a motif. Now, I've got mine green because I can see it better. But, like your phone, if you had a different color background, they do. They create... You got green too? Yeah, they actually do that. If you look in there, you have a motif that sets up, whatever colors you want. Yeah, there is definitely a motif. I think some Google phones are moving to that also. Okay, what'd you come up with?
Yellow and red in the fast food restaurants.
Ah, okay. Yellow and red in fast food. Why?
Make people eat faster.
It does. And they've done studies on this. Also, Subway. Subway did studies when they made their sign for Subway sandwiches. Originally, the color was supposed to be red and yellow. But people associated that with McDonald's and unhealthy food, so they changed it to green and yellow to represent a more natural and healthy motif. So yeah, fast food companies use it all the time. Good job. How about you guys? What'd you come up with? Okay, Schindler's List, done completely in black and white.
But there only one
Extra.
red.
Yes.
A Jewish girl, little girl wears the red coat,
Yes,
and it just stands out.
absolutely. Okay, but why do you think they did that?
It was depressing,
Yeah?
but it seems added some hopeful into the movie.
Okay.
Later, she was killed, so it's like even.
It becomes foreshadowing almost. Yeah, very good. Good example. How about you guys?
The disappearance of Malaysia flight let us realize that life is short. We need to cherish it. And
Okay, but how is that a motif? Like a theme?
life itself.
Okay. In what way? Don't try to make it too big. Sometimes something is small. So you can still look at airlines, okay? Airlines use motifs, but it's very simple. Like when you go into an airplane, you'll notice colors inside the airplane. Those colors are used to create different emotions. And you're starting to see in some airplanes, they're changing the colors of the lights during the flight. It's like a light pink or a light blue. Why? It creates a calming motif. Okay? It makes people less, aggressive. Okay? So that's the idea of the motif is something that we see that can affect our daily life, or it's something that we can see in film as well. Okay? Good. A lot of good ideas here. Yes?
Can you make it clear what's the difference between
Motif?
yes and the theme?
You can use both of those words interchangeably.
No
Yeah.
difference?
For our case, no. If we're talking about poetry, sometimes you can see a difference between motif and theme. But if we're looking at visual motif, the words motif and theme are the same. Okay? We'll talk about it a little bit more when we go into archetype. There's a minor difference, but I don't want to get into it just yet. Okay? Good question, though. All right. Any questions before we move on from motif? Really good examples, guys. All right. Let's take a look at another technique. Oops. All right. Do you remember us talking about allegory? Allegory. All right. This is a rhetorical strategy. Right? Think back to your ideas of rhetoric. It's a rhetorical strategy of expanding, sorry, I can't see my own right, of expanding metaphor through an entire narrative. Okay, let's break that down real quick. Extending a metaphor through an entire narrative. We know what a metaphor is, right?
Yes.
All right. It's a comparison, but not using like or as. Like her eyes were waterfalls. And it's a horrible metaphor, but yeah, time is money. That's another really good one. Okay. But what we do is we take this idea of the metaphor and we extend it through the entire piece. right? A good example of this is when we tie something back to either, say, religious literature or mythological literature in the same way. We can tie it back to an idea, for example, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is a Christian allegory. All right? It tells the story of Jesus, but without saying this is the story of Jesus. It's a metaphor where Aslan the lion actually represents Jesus, and then you have all these other characters that I won't get into that actually represent parts of Jesus' life, right? Another example of this might be Hunger Games. How many of you have seen the Hunger Games? Quite a few. And those of you who are in my Greek and Roman mythology class know that this is an allegory to what? Do you remember? A particular hero? Ah, how quickly you forget. It was the story of Theseus and the Minotaur. Yeah, Theseus and the Minotaur. The Hunger Games is an allegory that retells the story of Theseus and the Minotaur. Right? So the idea of the allegory is that we're retelling a story without retelling the story, right? Have you seen the movie 10 Things I Hate About You? Oh, you should. Another good movie. This is an allegory to Taming of the Shrew. Right? It's retelling the story of William Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew. Now, the two things we're going to look at right now, allegory and allusion, they can be very similar. Allegory tends to be bigger, though. Okay? It tends to drive the entire piece. Harry Potter, there's a lot of allegory in Harry Potter as well for about 4 or 5 different things, ranging from Christianity to Greek mythology to the ideas of alchemy, which is the science of turning lead into gold. There's an allegorical comparison to that. So we see this in a lot of different places. However, this is a type of symbolism that people tend to overlook because we get so wrapped up in enjoying the film, we don't think about it as a statement, as an argument, as something that's being said to influence somebody's opinion or point of view. Right? It's something that just gets kind of buried in the background. Enter us crazy people, we crazy people who like to analyze films, who like to analyze books, who read and watch things over and over and over and over and over again. And about the 3rd or 4th time you watch something, you look at it and go, hey, I think they're trying to tell me something here. Right? And this is where we start to look at the idea of allegory. We start to see what it becomes representative of. Now, you brought up a really good point earlier about the idea of symbolism being subjective. Right? Now, this is absolutely true. The idea of symbolism can be subjective. When we start to take it, though, and we look at an idea of symbolism and an idea of motif that come together to a bigger picture, that come together to a full work, we start to see that the author or the director aren't necessarily doing something by accident. It's something that's done very much on purpose. If we see the color purple used once in a film, we see that as just coincidental. If we see it 2 or 3 times, we see it as more coincidental. If we see it in every single shot of the film, then we start to see that as something that was done on purpose, and we start to ask, why is the director using this color in every single shot? So the motif plays into the idea of allegory by getting us to ask the question. The allegory then begs the question of what does it mean? What does this represent? Right? So, again, I would like you to talk in your groups. I want you to see if you can think of a particular film, a particular book, a particular song that could be allegorical about something else in the past. What song? Viva la Vida? Yeah, I know it. You have an idea? The Lion. Okay, Lion King is what? It is. It's a reach. I did say it. Yep, absolutely. That is an allegory. All right, guys, one more minute. All right, what did we come up with? Nothing yet? I'll come back to you. What did we come up with? Do what? Which movie? What is that? Oh, Django? D-J-A-N-G-O?
Triangle.
Triangle. What is this movie? I haven't heard of this movie. Yeah, no. What is this movie and how is it an allegory? I have not seen that. No. Is it a newer movie? Or?
Kind of thrillers.
Okay. And what is it an allegory to?
It's based on Greek mythology.
Okay, which one?
The song of the Aeolus.
Okay, yeah, Aeolus.
His song is called Sisyphus.
Interesting.
He promised to the death, but he broke the womb, and then the death wanted to punish him. He asked Sisyphus to push the stone on the mountain.
Yep,
And every time the mountain will fall down.
absolutely.
Do it again.
Yep. Yep, Sisyphus is the idea of Sisyphus has become a trope as well. It's used especially in, you see it a lot in poetry. So yeah, absolutely. I don't know this film. I'll have to go check out this film now. Very interesting. Cool. Good job. What did we come up with?
You know the song I talk about.
Yeah, Viva la Vida?
Yeah.
Okay. How is that an allegory?
It implies the revolution, France Revolution.
Interesting.
Yeah. Did you see the lyrics section?
I actually have not read the lyrics to it.
And where's the lyrics? Yeah, something like I used to roll the dice and feel that.
See, now I'm going to have to go listen to this song again and pick all this out. That's interesting. That's.
It is.
Yeah, I will check that out then. Good pulling music too. You got good job. Did you guys come up with something? E.T. That's what the internet said.
An allegory of Jesus.
It is. The idea that he comes down to earth and fixes things. Yeah, absolutely. E.T. is an allegory towards the Christian story. Very good job. We'll come back to that. Because, yes, it absolutely is. All right. Really good examples today, guys. Okay. Now, we've established this idea of allegory, and normally when I talk about allegory and allusion, I talk about allusion first instead of allegory because allegory is bigger. But as I've been teaching it, I've learned that it's easier to recognize allegory because it's bigger. All right? We see that allegory is a metaphor that drives the entire telling of a story. Whereas allusion is a little bit harder to see. When people look for allegory, they tend to miss it. When they try to look for allusion, especially in film, it's even harder to find. Okay? Especially if you're not trained to actually study film. So this idea of allusion is actually an indirect reference to a person, place, thing, or idea of a historical, cultural, literary, or political significance. All right? It is an instance. Okay? It's not necessarily driving the entire story. But if we understand, say, a character or an event or something that has an allusion to it, it makes us look at the person in a different way. All right? So, there is an allegory between The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and the Christian story. There is an allegory between the movie E.T. and a Christian story as well. But there are smaller parts that are put together. For example, in E.T., there are allusions to Jesus and E.T. that make us see E.T. as a Christian figure. Another example of this in literature is a story called The Things They Carried. This story it's set in the Vietnam War, and it's about these soldiers who we come to know them through the things they carried. But the lieutenant's name, the person who's guiding them through the jungle, who's in charge of these other people, is named Jim Cross. Okay? Jim Cross. J.C. Right? So what we see here is rather than it being an allegory, we have allusion, a brief allusion to the idea of Jim Cross as a leader. We equate him with Jesus because of the initials, because of the name. That's allusion. It's smaller. All right? It's something that we may or may not see. I don't want to go into too much more detail about this because we'll talk a lot more about it in Archetype too. But the point you need to take away from this is the difference between allegory and allusion is just how significant it is within the entire text. And when I say significant, I don't mean important. I mean how noticeable it is. Okay? So the idea of allusion may be towards one character or one particular scene or one idea. Or in a book, it might be for the character as well, or one thing that they do that becomes relevant in a different way. It takes place outside, and the author or the director tend to expect us to have enough knowledge of this historical or political event to recognize, hey, he's trying to put these two ideas together. All right? Questions about allusion, allegory, theme, motif, symbolism.
So allusion and focus is more in detail.
Yes, allusion can be more detailed, but it's generally what we would call incidental. It's something that we see as focusing on a singular person or a single idea, and it tends to relate back to a single historical or political thing. All right. Again, I'm trying to give you guys a very brief overview of this because we could do entire classes just on the idea of symbolism in a single text or allegory in a single text. Right now, what I'm trying to do is give you just a brief idea of how to recognize some of these as you go through and read your books, watch your films, or study behavior. All right, let's apply this then. And I happen to know there's a lot written about it, and you know it. Let's take a look at Harry Potter. Now, what I would like for you guys to do in your groups is jump online. I want you to start looking at what people say about these different techniques, about these different ideas of textual analysis in Harry Potter. Now, this is obviously from the film. I would like for you to see what you can find in the books. Okay? Books are 10 times better anyway. Okay? So in your groups, start looking at what you can find. I promise you, There are websites and articles and all kinds of books written about different ideas of textual analysis in Harry Potter. And I just want you to see what's available and how you can actually put these together. I'll go back now to the actual themes where they're all up on the screen. And if you just type in Harry Potter textual analysis, or you type in Harry Potter and illusion, or Harry Potter and allegory, or Harry Potter and symbolism, I think you're going to find quite a bit. I would like for you to come up in your group with 5 different ideas that are present in the Harry Potter series. All right? So you have, I'll give you 10 minutes to do this. So make sure you talk to each other. Make sure you're not overlapping on what you're doing. But find examples of this in the books. 5
different ideas about
motif, symbolism, allegory, illusion, any of them. I'll let you choose. That's all right. A lot of them will overlap. Especially the motifs and themes, they will overlap between the books and the films. Not necessarily. They can be story-driven as well. Well, like I mentioned when we were talking about motifs, there's a motif of death in Harry Potter. There's a motif of magic that's created in Harry Potter. Would Harry Potter be Harry Potter without them using magic? No.
There is that, and there is magic.
There is. And that's a motif. That's a theme. It's a fantasy motif. It's a fantasy theme. We come to expect certain things out of that. And we'll see probably next class how that turns into the idea of archetype and trope. Yeah, if you just look up Harry Potter themes or Harry Potter motifs or Harry Potter illusions. Remember, it's allusion, like it's alluding to something, not illusion, like poof, a magic trick. Allusion, yep. What kind of ideas do you have so far?
the name of series.
Okay.
Like,
Okay, and what is that?
astronomy.
Okay. What does it represent?
First name is another name of dog star.
It is. Very good. But then we get into the question, why? Yeah, why is his name related to the dog star, to Sirius? That's where the analysis comes in. Did you come up with some ideas?
In the Greek methodology,
Mm-hmm.
Zeus
Zeus? Yeah.
have a narrow escape.
Mm-hmm.
The revenge in the Harry Potter. There's also a narrow escape that from,
Many narrow escapes, yeah.
yeah, but from the very beginning, he had a narrow escape and comes with revenge at the last.
He did. That actually ties back into the scar. Yeah. Think about this. What happened with Harry Potter's scar in the end? Sort of.
I mean, the connection between
There,
now we can't see.
right. There's also a connection to something in Greek mythology as well. There is a connection between Harry Potter's scar in the story with something in Greek mythology also. Yes, there is.
I think I should have taken it.
I'm going to be reteaching it in June also. Yeah.
But at that time, probably I'll go.
Let's talk about that after class. Okay? Seriously. Ladies, what have you come up with?
Illusion.
Okay.
The name of Remus Lupin.
Remus Lupin. Yep.
Is an allusion to Roman mythology.
It is.
The founder of Rome was said to be raised by war,
Yep.
which Lupin's name, and he is being a werewolf.
Absolutely. Rome was supposedly founded by two brothers, Romulus and Remus. And in Harry Potter, Remus Lupin also has a brother named Romulus. And they're werewolves. Good. Good job. Do you have another one? Yes. But hold on to archetype because we're going to talk a lot about archetype next class. Okay? There's a lot of archetypes playing out. Okay? Good. How about you guys? What'd you come up with? Okay? Like what? Okay? What does it symbolize?
Symbolize a sort of like a fate.
Really? In what way?
Because it was given by his enemies.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Interesting idea. Cool. What else? It is. It is very much a Christian allegory. Yep. There are two books written about this, and it's called Finding God in Harry Potter. A series of books, Finding God in Harry Potter, and part 2 of that book also. And it goes through all of the books and explains exactly how it is a Christian allegory. Good. Okay. What I want you to take away from this is actually twofold. I want you to look at this when you're looking at your example films, but also in your specific subject films also, or your books, or your music, or whatever you're doing, even if you're looking at behavior. You're going to use this in both your examples and your specific text. This is the glue that's going to tie your examples to that one text that you focus on. All right? So look for ideas that you can see, that you can recognize in whether it's a written text or in a film, or in, some of you are doing television shows. Again, you've all chosen some really cool topics, and I look forward to seeing them, but I look forward to seeing them done properly and with a lot of, I want you to get into them. I want you to really experience what it means to analyze and look at argument and point of view within these texts, because I think you're going to find that there's a lot more than you're used to seeing in these actual texts. And in doing so, I hope you start to realize that this is happening all around you all the time, whether it's a TV show that you're watching when you go home tonight, or if it's something that you notice behavior-wise when you're out walking around. These are things that affect our lives. And when we come to recognize these things, when we come to recognize the presentation of different points of view and the presentation of different arguments, we look at the world in a totally different way. And that's something we're going to continue to look at throughout the course of this class. Now, we are moving on to the next step of your research paper also. So it's very important that you start looking for sources. Your next thing that will be due is your bibliography big list. All right? This is where you're looking for 30 sources. We'll talk a little bit more about this in the next class, but what you need to do now is you need to be going to the library. You need to be going online and looking for sources that might relate to your actual research paper. I cannot stress this enough, and you're not going to hear many professors say this. You are not supposed to read every single source that you're looking for right now. You need to skim them. You need to look at the actual prospectus. You need to look at the actual summaries that are provided and say, could this possibly fit in with my research? If you try to go through and read all 30 articles and all 30 books and all 30 whatever you're using, it's going to take you forever, and it's going to make you hate what you're doing. Approach it on the surface. Right now we're looking on the surface. We will get into more detail as you narrow your list down. We're looking for quantity right now. We're going to approach quality when we start looking at the annotated bibliography. So, a week from Wednesday, so not this Wednesday, but next Wednesday, your bibliography big list will be due. And you need to have at least 30 sources, 30, on that big list. You're not annotating these. All you're doing is listing them. But you need to make sure that you're spending time to find these sources. They do not all need to be online sources. You need to find things that are actually articles and not just websites. One question that has come up, some of you are doing, I think one person here is doing Korean soap opera. Some of you are looking at some different things from around the world. Yeah, it's pretty cool. But what I want to make clear is your sources do not necessarily have to be in English. All right? Some of you are looking at Chinese culture. You may find a source that is in Chinese. And you ask me, can you use this? Absolutely. Okay? But here's the thing. If you use a Chinese source or a Korean source, it's going to require some extra translation work on your part. So I don't want you to use all Chinese sources. Please do not use all Chinese sources. Most of them need to be in English. To kind of help govern that, the choices that you make, if you choose Chinese sources or Korean sources, you're going to have to translate some of them. All right? So I will talk at a later date about how to actually cite sources that you've translated as paraphrases into your paper. But for right now, focus on finding your sources and try to make most of them in English. All right? Next class period. We'll meet in here, but then we're going to go to the library, and we're going to actually start working on getting those sources. And then we'll probably talk a little bit about archetype while we're in there. Questions?
Can you ask us to focus on one main article?
Yes.
So
Well, article, or it depends on what your subject was.
And if we need to focus on one article, we should find other sources to support our idea?
Yes. So you're going to be focusing on that one article. Your other articles are going to support your point of view and how you have read that article, how you interpret that article.
And this class is about textual analysis.
It's about literary analysis.
Yeah.
Okay? Remember, there's a difference between literary analysis and textual analysis.
We will do literary analysis.
Yes.
This is textual.
This is one way that you can approach literary analysis, especially if you're addressing a specific film or a book or something like that. Yeah. Okay.
So it gives us the sense of connection between.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Okay. Other questions? All right, guys, that about does it for class today. So I will see some of you tomorrow, some of you on Wednesday. Actually, see you all again on Wednesday, but see you again. Okay, you guys have a good day. We'll see you later.